Behind rusted gates and crumbling brick walls lie the forgotten nightmares of abandoned asylums, places where pain echoed louder than prayers, and silence was never truly empty. In this video, we'll step into 3 of the most chilling true stories ever whispered from within these cursed halls. Tales of shadows, chains, and voices that refused to fade. These aren't just ghost stories, they're warnings. Welcome to Mr. Darkveil, and whatever you do, don't look back. Story 1. My name is Ellis Grant. I've spent the last decade investigating places most people wouldn't dare set foot in. Shadowed corridors, abandoned wards, homes where the walls seemed to breathe. I've walked through freezing basements at 3 a.m., felt the floor shift beneath me in buildings that shouldn't still be standing, and heard voices on tape I know weren't there when I hit record, but none of it ever compared to what happened at Cranbrook. Cranbrook Asylum was nestled in the woods outside of Millersfield, a sleepy New England town with a population smaller than the waiting list for the local diner. It was opened in 1907 as a progressive psychiatric facility, though progressive in those days meant restraint chairs, hydrotherapy, and treatments that seemed more like punishments. Officially, the asylum was shut down in 1979 due to funding cuts and multiple reports of abuse. Unofficially, whispers say it was shut down because something inside refused to let the patients leave, even after death. I'd read about Cranbrook in old journals, seen it mentioned in the footnotes of local newspapers, always passed over, always just a line or two before moving on. But those who knew of it knew. It had a reputation among investigators. Most stayed away. I didn't. It was a cold October evening when I arrived, just before sunset. I always went alone, no film crew, no hype, just me, a bag of equipment, and a heavy flashlight. I parked a quarter-mile down the hill, walked through dying foliage and up the winding path to the asylum's front gates. The building rose like a shadowed monolith through the trees, 3 stories tall, slate roof collapsing in patches, windows long shattered and eyes darkened. Ivy crawled across the stone like veins. There was a silence to the air, not just from the lack of people, but from the land itself. The birds didn't sing. The wind barely stirred. It was the kind of quiet that presses against your skin like humidity, thick, unnatural, watching. I stepped through the broken entrance. The main hallway was a mess of collapsed ceiling tiles, scattered medical files, broken gurneys. Spray paint from thrill seekers and ghost hunters marked the walls, but even those looked faded as if the building itself tried to erase them. I did a quick sweep of the first floor, just to get my bearings. No wildlife, no squatters, just me and whatever else might be listening. I set up my first EVP session in what had once been the intake office. The air was stale with mold and age. I turned on the digital recorder, set it on the desk, and asked the usual, "Is anyone here with me? Can you tell me your name? What happened to you?" Nothing, just the buzz of silence. I moved deeper. I reached the medical wing just as the sun dipped beneath the trees. The hallway lights, broken and useless, cast jagged shadows across the cracked floor. I passed treatment rooms with rusted medical tables and restraints still bolted to walls. Then I found the hydrotherapy chamber. It was a tiled room, empty except for a large claw-footed tub in the center. Stains marred the porcelain. The pipes overhead hissed slightly, though the water had been shut off for decades. I sat, turned on my EVP recorder again, and spoke softly. "Why are you still here? What keeps you in this place?" A chill ran down my spine. The temperature had dropped sharply, noticeably, breath visible cold. I held my ground. And then, footsteps, clear, behind me. I spun, No one, I called out. My voice bounced back at me, dead and flat. I hit stop on the recorder, pocketed it, and left the room. The air around the tub thick with a sour metallic smell, like blood and rust. My skin prickled. I moved quickly, heading to the upper floors. The patient dormitories. The worst stories had always come from the second floor. Restraint rooms, isolation cells, the place where the unmanageable were kept. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and dark, doors on either side slightly ajar. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then came back. I stepped into the first room. The walls were covered in scratches, hundreds, no, thousands of them, etched deep into plaster. One word repeated over and over: watch. I backed out and moved on. The next few rooms were silent, still, until I reached the sixth door on the left. I pushed it open. There was a figure standing by the window, not facing me, facing the glass. Still, motionless. I stopped breathing. I blinked. Gone. Just dust and decay. I stepped inside, slowly, heart pounding. The window was cracked, and on the sill, written in grime, was a message. Don't let it see you. My chest tightened. I spun. Nothing, but I felt it. A presence. Not just watching, circling, coiled in the shadows. I started down the hallway again. Faster now. I needed to get out. I needed air. Then, the laughing started. Faint at first, childlike, then louder, closer. I ran. The hallway stretched impossibly long, like it wasn't letting me leave. Doors slammed behind me as I passed them. And then, silence. I found the stairs and bolted down them, 2 at a time, my footsteps echoing like gunshots. I didn't stop until I was outside. I didn't even look back. I got in my car, drove until I hit the interstate, and didn't say a word for hours. When I got home, I played the recordings, the intake office, silence, the hydrotherapy room. After I asked, "Why are you still here?" There was a pause, then something responded. A voice, wet, rasping. We never left. Then came the tub. Sloshing water, even though the pipes were bone dry. And just before I shut the recording off, another whisper. "He sees you now." That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've stopped investigating. I don't step near abandoned buildings. I threw out the equipment, burned the clothes I wore that night. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up and hear something, moving in the hallway outside my bedroom. Slow, wet, dragging. And when I check the window, just before the dawn, there's a figure watching from the trees. Tall, motionless, waiting. Story 2. There are places in this world where the past never quite dies. It festers, it lingers, and sometimes it reaches out to touch the living. My name is Isaac Hayes, and this is not a story I tell lightly. I used to be an urban explorer, not for fame, not for views. I did it for the history, the forgotten places, the lost architecture, the echoes left behind in rotting walls. For years, I thought the worst thing I'd face would be a collapsing ceiling or an angry squatter. I was wrong. In September of 2018, I joined a small group of explorers on a trip to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. Most know it for its staggering size and Gothic architecture. Over 240,000 square feet of decaying corridors and rooms that once held the mentally ill, the broken, and the forsaken. What many don't realize is just how deep the suffering went inside those walls. Overcrowded wards, barbaric treatments, solitary confinement, lobotomies performed like clockwork. Some patients weren't even mentally ill, just unwanted, inconvenient. We arrived on a Saturday morning. Me, Lena, Chris, and our guide. An older man named Wallace who had explored the asylum before and claimed he'd seen things he wouldn't unsee. Wallace was gaunt, twitchy, a Vietnam vet who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. "You need to respect this place," he said, as we stood before the looming facade. "It remembers pain, it doesn't forgive." I thought he was just trying to freak us out. Inside, the asylum was every bit as decayed and beautiful as I imagined. Paint peeled in long strips from the walls, like the building was shedding skin. Old gurneys sat rusted in hallways, and iron bed frames sagged in rooms choked with dust. We moved slowly, documenting everything. By early evening, we had reached the Civil War wing, the oldest part of the asylum. Wallace told us this was where the worst patients were kept, the violent, the forgotten, the ones who never left. "It's where the chains are," he said. "Chains?" Chris asked, raising an eyebrow. Wallace led us to a series of padded cells, long stripped bare, but one door, rusted and heavy, remained chained shut from the outside. The links were thick, iron, and ancient, caked with rust and what looked like dried, blackened blood. This was the hell room, Wallace explained. They used to chain the violent ones in here, sometimes multiple at once. No light, no air, just the screams. A chill crawled down my spine, but I tried to play it cool. "Ever go in?" I asked. Wallace didn't answer. We set up equipment outside the chained room, infrared cameras, EMF meters, and Lena's audio recorder for EVP. The air was thick, humid. Time felt distorted like the asylum swallowed up hours. That's when it started. First came the sound, faint, rhythmic clinking, like chains swaying slowly, but none of us were near them. Then Lena, who was monitoring audio levels, turned pale. "There's something on the recording," she whispered. We listened, static, then a low, guttural moan, a voice not quite human. It spoke just one word, release. Wallace turned on his heel. "Pack it up, we're done." But Chris wasn't having it. "No way, we came all this way, that was real EVP. We have to keep going." Lena was shaking. "Something isn't right here, Chris. I'm just going to look inside," he said, lifting the camera. A peek. Against our protests, Chris stepped forward and began fiddling with the chains. The links groaned as he shifted them. The door creaked open half an inch. And that's when the chains moved on their own. We all saw it. The loose end, which Chris had let fall, coiled up like a snake and snapped taut around his wrist. He screamed. The rest of us rushed forward, but the chain pulled tighter, dragging him toward the door. Wallace grabbed a crowbar from his pack and wedged it between the links. I clawed at the metal with my bare hands, feeling it burn into my skin. Finally, it gave. Chris stumbled back, his wrist torn and bleeding. The chain clattered to the ground, unmoving. We left that wing immediately, but the asylum wasn't done with us. That night, we camped nearby in a rented cabin just outside the asylum grounds. None of us spoke much. Chris was pale, quiet. Lena kept replaying the audio clip, which now inexplicably contained a second voice. 3 shall enter, 1 shall stay. Wallace refused to stay indoors. He built a fire outside and sat with a loaded pistol on his lap. "This place follows you," he muttered. "I told you, it remembers." I didn't sleep that night. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard chains, not outside, inside the cabin, clinking, dragging. I got up, heart pounding, and followed the sound to the bathroom. No one was there, but in the mirror, just for a second, I saw something behind me. A figure, long arms, hollow eyes. It vanished when I turned. The next morning, Lena was gone. Vanished without a trace. Her bed was undisturbed, no signs of a struggle. Just the audio recorder still running. The last thing it captured, a voice. Calm, inhuman, come home. We called the police. They found no evidence of a break-in, no footprints, no trace. just the faint smell of iron, like rust and blood. Chris never spoke again. He checked himself into a facility 6 months later, catatonic. Every so often, he mutters one word, chains. Wallace died the following year, car crash on an empty road. But the coroner's report listed something odd. His hands had deep lacerations, like he'd been gripping barbed wire. As for me, I left exploring behind, sold all my equipment. I moved to a small town in Oregon where no one knows my name. But I still hear them sometimes at night, chains dragging across the floor. And once, just once, I saw the door from the Civil War wing in a dream. The chains were off. The door was open, and something inside was smiling. Story 3. You never forget the sound of a voice that shouldn't be there, especially when it's whispering your name. My name is Ellie Travers. I'm a historical archivist by trade, with a quiet obsession for places most people would never dare step foot in. Not because I'm a thrill seeker, I've never liked that term, but because places hold echoes, buildings remember things, and abandoned asylums, they scream in silence. I first learned about the Willard Asylum for the chronic insane during a college internship, buried deep in a New York State archive room. The name appeared on dozens of patient files, dated between 1900 and 1945. The notes were cryptic, nonverbal, rocking endlessly, accused of seeing figures in mirrors, persistent auditory hallucinations, whispering voices, over and over, whispering voices. It fascinated me. But what truly pushed me to go there was a box I discovered 5 years later, long after I'd graduated and begun working as a preservation consultant. The box had no return address. It just showed up at the office. Inside were black and white photos of the asylum's East Wing. Crumbling corridors, decayed patient rooms, and in one of them there was a figure, thin, indistinct, crouched in the shadows of what looked like a long forgotten hallway. A post-it note was stuck to the back. "You should see what's still inside." The handwriting matched none of my colleagues. I still don't know who sent it. But I went. It was a gray October morning when I arrived at Willard. Clouds hung low and heavy over the Finger Lakes region, pressing down like a shroud. The asylum ground sprawled across hundreds of acres, its buildings decaying like corpses, vines, choking stone and wood. The main building loomed like something from a forgotten century. Gothic spires, broken windows, rust-eaten iron bars. I parked half a mile away and walked in, camera and recorder in my pack, flashlight in hand. The entrance to the East Wing had long since been sealed, but vandals or curiosity seekers had broken part of it open. I slid through the gap, heart pounding, swallowed immediately by the stale, cold air. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. No birds, no wind, just the slow creak of old wood and the distant drip of water from a burst pipe somewhere above. The East Wing had once housed the more difficult patients, according to the few blueprints I'd found. Violent, catatonic, or simply those society didn't know what to do with. The ones they chained to walls or locked in darkness. I took my time exploring, snapping photos, documenting everything, until I reached a corridor marked Ward E3. It was darker there, damper. My flashlight flickered, and that's when I heard it. Not a footstep, not a door, a whisper. "Ellie." I froze. The sound hadn't come from behind or ahead. It had come from inside my right ear, like someone had leaned in, lips nearly touching skin, and breathed my name. I turned, light, sweeping wildly across the peeling walls, the flaking paint like molting skin. No one. I chalked it up to nerves, the brain's tendency to fill silence with imagined sounds. But then it happened again. Leave. Clearer this time, harsher. I checked my recorder. It was still running. My fingers trembled as I held it. Then a second sound, faint but rhythmic, a shuffling, dragging sound from further down the corridor. I followed it. The hallway narrowed, ceiling sagging, walls pocked with moisture and rot. I passed rusted doors marked with patient numbers, 232, 233, 234. One hung open, revealing a narrow room with a single metal bed frame. The mattress was long gone, but the straps remained, leather cracked and brittle. I stepped inside. The smell hit me like a fist, mildew, copper, and something fouler underneath. I turned on my recorder, hoping to capture ambient noise, and asked aloud, "Is anyone here?" Silence, and then static. The recorder buzzed faintly, distorting as if something were pressing against it from the inside. The screen blinked, and over the static a voice, quiet, strained, almost weeping. They wouldn't let us out. I dropped the recorder. When I picked it back up, it was dead. That's when the laughter started. From the hallway, a low, wet giggle, not childlike, not joyful, sick, mirthless, and it was getting closer. I didn't run. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe part of me wanted to see what was coming. Maybe I was paralyzed. The laughter stopped just outside the door. I stepped forward, poking my flashlight into the hallway, and found it empty. But the temperature had dropped. My breath came out in clouds. I turned to leave and saw movement behind me in the mirror. That's when I realized something truly wrong. There hadn't been a mirror before, but now one stood across from the bed, tall, cracked, ancient, covered in grime. And in its reflection, a figure, not me, something taller, thin, draped in what looked like tattered asylum robes. Its face was long and misshapen, half obscured by shadow. But its eyes, or where eyes should have been, were holes. It was standing behind me. I spun. Nothing. When I looked back, the mirror was gone. That broke me. I staggered out of the room, heart hammering. I don't remember how I made it back through the hall, through the crumbling corridors. But I remember the whispers. They followed me. Soft at first, then louder. Not words anymore, just breathe. Dozens of them, hundreds, right in my ears. I reached the exit, practically crawling through the broken opening. The light outside was blinding. I collapsed on the grass and vomited. Later in my apartment, I charged the recorder and played it back. At first, there was nothing but static, then the whisper, "Ellie," followed by faint giggling. Then loud, garbled breathing. And finally, something I will never forget. A chorus of voices, hundreds, layered atop one another, all whispering the same word. Stay. I deleted the file. But even now I still hear them. Sometimes in dreams. Sometimes when I'm standing too long in silence. And always when I look into mirrors. I never went back to Willard. The building is scheduled for demolition next year, but I wonder, when they tear it down, where will the whispers go? And who will they follow next? Because I know the truth now. The patients never left. Their pain, their fear. It's soaked into the walls, into the earth, and into anyone foolish enough to listen. If you ever feel watched in a that should be empty, if you ever hear your name when no one is around, don't answer, don't look back. Some echoes aren't just sound, some whispers are waiting to be heard. Some places were never meant to be revisited. The screams may have faded, but the walls remember. The chains still rattle, and the shadows still move. If you've ever felt watched in a place long forgotten, or heard something that shouldn't exist, share your story in the comments. We might just feature it. Until next time, stay out of the dark. This is Mr. Darkveil signing off.